Entitlement often felt like power, a shield against rules and consequences. When that illusion collided with reality, the result was not embarrassment, but catastrophe. The series examined 7 cases in which refusal to follow simple rules and repeated warnings ignored led to preventable deaths. The countdown began with number 7, where a refusal to wait in a mall led to a fatal escalator encounter. March 13, 2018. Linda Foster, 54, managed the women's apparel section at Crestview Mall in suburban Illinois. Known to staff for demanding immediate service and special accommodations, Linda's entitlement was visible in routine interactions. Employees described her as the type who would snap at cashiers, argue over return policies, and expect rules to bend for her. Her distinct platinum bob and sharp-heeled shoes became a warning sign for new hires, a cue to prepare for confrontation. That Tuesday, the central escalator was cordoned off for urgent repairs. Bright orange barriers, yellow tape, and a bold sign saying "Out of service, do not enter" blocked both entrances. Mall security stood by, redirecting shoppers to the stairs just 20 feet away. Linda arrived in a hurry, ignored the warnings, and demanded the escalator be reopened for her. Security explained repairs were underway and asked her to use the stairs. Witnesses recalled Linda raising her voice and insisting she didn't do stairs, that her time was too valuable to wait. Surveillance footage later confirmed she ducked under the barrier at 1:07 p.m., brushing past staff who tried to stop her. Within seconds, Linda's scarf caught in the exposed skirt step gap, just 4 millimeters wide, but enough to snag loose clothing. The escalator's mechanism, still powered for diagnostic testing, pulled the fabric and trapped her arm. Maintenance workers hit the emergency stop, but the entrapment was already severe. Paramedics arrived at 1:13 p.m. and attempted resuscitation, but Linda was pronounced dead at 1:27 p.m. from traumatic asphyxia and crush injuries. The Consumer Product Safety Commission's review cited her barrier breach as the direct cause, noting that 20% of escalator injuries involve entrapment and that proper lockout-tagout procedures had been followed by staff. The mall was cleared of liability, but new reinforced barriers were installed. For many, the tragedy was a grim reminder that sometimes the rules are all that stand between inconvenience and catastrophe. July 24, 2016. Patricia Wallace, 43, arrived at the Pinebrook Zoological Gardens just after noon, smartphone in hand, and 2 children trailing behind. Regular visitors knew her for frequent confrontations with staff about stroller restrictions and reserved picnic areas. Other parents described her as quick to challenge any rule she found inconvenient, often insisting that her family deserved special consideration. She wore a designer sun hat and carried a monogrammed tote, and her voice carried across the entry plaza as she demanded directions to the Big Cat exhibit. The lion enclosure was protected by a 6-foot primary fence and a 3-foot secondary barrier, both topped with warning signs that read, "Do not cross, dangerous animals." That afternoon, a professional photographer was stationed nearby offering souvenir photos for guests. Patricia dismissed the service, waved off the photographer, and told her children she could get a better shot herself. 3 separate times, zookeepers instructed her to remain behind the barrier, pointing out the posted guidelines and reminding her of the risks. Phone footage from a bystander later confirmed that Patricia ignored these warnings and stepped over the low fence while her children watched. Witnesses later recalled Patricia brushing off staff concerns, calling the rules overkill and saying she knew what she was doing. As she positioned herself for a selfie at the fence, a juvenile lioness was startled by the sudden movement and lunged toward the barrier. Patricia lost her balance and tumbled into the restricted area. The animal closed the distance in seconds. Keeper alarms sounded, and staff rushed to intervene, but the lioness made contact and caused catastrophic trauma. Emergency responders arrived within 4 minutes. Paramedics documented severe injuries on arrival and provided advanced life support on scene. Despite those efforts, Patricia was pronounced dead at the scene from massive hemorrhage and multiple penetrating wounds. The medical examiner recorded the cause of death as blunt and sharp force trauma consistent with an animal attack and noted the rapid progression from injury to fatal blood loss. The zoo's internal review identified Patricia's unauthorized entry and disregard for repeated warnings as the direct cause of the incident. The facility installed higher barriers and increased staff patrols, but no national regulations changed. Among staff and regular visitors, the response was subdued, many pointing to the clear signage and the multiple attempts to stop her. For those who witnessed the event, the lesson was clear and preventable. In a place where wild animals lived, the rules were not suggestions. August 12, 2019, Melissa Grant, 34, entered Sunridge Amusement Park in Central Ohio. Her impatience was already apparent as she joined the line for the cyclone. Colleagues later described her as someone who routinely ignored safety protocols and dismissed instructions she found inconvenient. That afternoon, she argued with staff and demanded faster boarding, drawing attention to herself before even reaching the ride platform. The Cyclone's lap bars, built to ASTM F24 standards, were engineered to withstand 1,200 newtons, far more than a person could overcome unaided. Operators followed a strict checklist and confirmed every restraint by hand and eye before dispatch. Assigned the front row, Melissa interrupted the operator's instructions, insisting her lap bar was too tight. When told it could not be adjusted, she rolled her eyes and muttered about unnecessary rules. The operator, a 17-year-old seasonal worker, documented her refusal in the ride log and issued 2 warnings before starting the cycle. Staff later described her pattern of demanding special treatment and difficulty with authority. CCTV footage later revealed that Melissa deliberately unlatched her restraint as the train crested the 110-foot apex at 37 miles per hour. Operators and witnesses shouted warnings, and the operator engaged emergency procedures as soon as the ejection occurred. Witnesses described chaos and screaming, and staff recalled a string of prior incidents where she ignored explicit warnings from ride personnel. But as the coaster plunged, G-forces peaked at 3.8 times the force of gravity. Melissa braced herself with her arms, but within seconds, she was ejected from her seat, tumbling over the side of the car. The coaster's momentum and the height of the drop produced a rapid sequence of forces that resulted in blunt impact against structural elements. Witnesses described a fraction of a second between ejection and the train's halt, and the operator immediately followed emergency shutdown and rescue protocols. Medical teams arrived within 4 minutes. Paramedics found Melissa unresponsive with injuries consistent with fatal blunt force trauma. Emergency responders performed advanced life support measures, including airway management and chest compressions, but she showed no meaningful response. She was pronounced dead at 2:46 in the afternoon. The coroner's report cited multiple fractures and internal injuries as the cause of death. State regulators cleared the operator and the park, citing Melissa's refusal to follow safety instructions as the direct cause. The incident prompted a new state law that required electronic restraint sensors and operator override locks on all rides. Among staff, the message was clear: safety rules exist for a reason, and physics is not negotiable. September 28, 2020. Brenda McAllister, 62, was running late for a property showing on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge. As a real estate agent with a reputation for impatience, Brenda often treated traffic laws as obstacles to her schedule. Colleagues described her as someone who would double park in fire lanes, roll through stop signs, and argue with meter attendants. Her silver sedan and signature oversized sunglasses were well known around town. Neighbors recalled heated exchanges over street parking, while former clients remembered her as always in a hurry, rules be damned. The intersection at County Road 14 and Maple Avenue featured dual crossing gates, flashing red lights, and a warning bell system. The National Transportation Safety Board reported the gates automatically lowered 24 seconds before a train's arrival, leaving ample time for vehicles to clear the tracks. On that Monday, a 7,500-ton freight train was approaching at 55 miles per hour. Crossing cameras captured Brenda's car idling at the front of the line as the gates descended and the bells sounded. Phone records later confirmed she was on a call, discussing an upcoming open house. Witnesses said Brenda glanced at her watch, then steered around the lowered gate with one hand on the wheel and the other holding her phone. The train's horn blasted repeatedly, but her windows were up. In the final seconds, the locomotive engineer engaged the emergency brakes, but a freight train at that speed required over a mile to stop. The impact occurred at 3:12 in the afternoon, crushing the car and scattering debris across both tracks. Emergency crews arrived within 7 minutes. Brenda was pronounced dead at the scene from massive blunt force trauma. The official investigation cited driver error and distraction as the sole causes. The railroad was cleared of responsibility. The crossing had functioned as designed. In response, county officials installed additional barriers and upgraded camera systems. Among local residents, the tragedy inspired little sympathy, with many pointing to Brenda's well-known disregard for the rules. The lesson repeated in public safety campaigns was clear. No schedule was worth outpacing a freight train. June 30th, 2021. Cynthia Rowe, age 41, was well known in Lakewood for her extravagant block parties and for her refusal to follow city rules. She had developed a reputation for pushing boundaries, organizing unpermitted street events, ignoring curfews, and dismissing safety warnings as unnecessary. City records showed 3 previous citations for unauthorized fireworks at her gatherings. One neighbor summed her up, she thought the rules didn't apply to her. That year's 4th of July celebration was set for the local soccer field, bordered by homes and dry grass. Cynthia applied for a fireworks permit, but was denied because she lacked NFPA certification and because officials were concerned about how she stored explosives. The city offered to help her hire licensed professionals at a discount, but Cynthia refused. She arrived early, unloading commercial shells and cardboard mortars from her SUV. Witnesses said she brushed off the fire marshal's warnings, insisting, "I've done this before. It's perfectly safe." NFPA standards required at least 70 feet of separation for every inch of shell diameter. That requirement meant 210 feet for the 3-inch shells Cynthia brought. Instead of meeting that separation, and instead of using steel containment, she set up launch tubes just 40 feet from the crowd and kept the shells in a plastic bin next to the firing area. The fire marshal warned her again that she must stop or face a fine. Cynthia waved him off, telling him he was trying to ruin the fun. Multiple warnings were ignored, and witnesses later described a pattern of escalation. Neighbors recalled that she dismissed expert advice and repeated that she knew what she was doing. Staff and the fire marshal attempted to intervene, but Cynthia pushed back, insisting the display proceed as planned. Her refusal to comply removed layers of safety that existed to protect attendees. As dusk fell, Cynthia lit the first shell with a barbecue lighter. The mortar tube was angled incorrectly. The shell failed to launch and detonated at ground level after only 2.6 seconds. The explosion scattered burning debris and chemical residues, setting Cynthia's clothes on fire and causing other shells in the plastic bin to rupture. The crowd panicked. Some people tried to smother flames with bottled water, while others called 911. Witnesses described terror as embers and shrapnel rained into the audience. Paramedics arrived on scene at 9:18 p.m. Cynthia suffered third-degree burns over 80% of her body, and she had inhaled toxic combustion smoke. Emergency responders began advanced airway management and fluid resuscitation on scene, and she was transported to a regional burn center for surgical evaluation. She died at 3:40 a.m. The city's investigation cataloged multiple violations of NFPA 1123 and NFPA 1126 related to separation distances, storage, and handling of commercial shells. In response, officials passed an ordinance requiring all public fireworks displays to be conducted by licensed professionals. Cynthia's death became a stark, unavoidable reminder of why those standards exist. October 15, 2022. Diane Caldwell, age 52, arrived at Midtown Plaza just after 4 p.m., her Lexus SUV pausing in the main lane with hazard lights flashing. Store managers recognized her. Diane had a reputation for heated disputes over parking, with 3 prior complaints logged in the past year. She wore a crisp blazer and sunglasses, her stance rigid as she scanned the crowded lot. Midtown Plaza's lot was marked for two-way traffic and lined with mirrored security domes. That afternoon, a white sedan signaled for a space as a shopper pulled out. Diane accelerated, blocking the spot. The sedan's driver, a 28-year-old teacher, slowed, dashcam running, as Diane stepped out and planted herself in front of the car, arms folded. Bystanders urged her to step aside. The teacher, window down, calmly explained she had the right of way. Diane argued, raising her voice and threatening to call mall security. Security video, timestamped 16:07:13, captured Diane pacing in front of the sedan, gesturing sharply. The sedan idled at 6 miles per hour, brake lights on. After nearly a minute, the driver edged forward, trying to maneuver around. Diane stepped directly into the car's path. At 6 miles per hour, the sedan generated 2.7 kilojoules of kinetic energy. Dashcam audio measured the driver's reaction time at 0.8 seconds. When Diane refused to yield, the car clipped her knee. She lost balance, fell backward, and struck her head on the pavement. Shoppers gasped. The driver stopped at once and called 911. Paramedics arrived within 5 minutes. Diane was unresponsive, with no pulse. She was pronounced dead at 4:18 p.m., the cause listed as blunt force trauma and basal skull fracture. Police reviewed security and dashcam footage, confirming the driver's actions were within legal limits. Investigators found Diane's sudden movement left no time to avoid the collision. The incident drew national attention, sparking debate over pedestrian aggression and parking lot safety. Mall management widened lanes, added bollards, and increased patrols. Among staff, sympathy was limited, and many cited Diane's pattern of confrontational behavior. Investigators concluded the death was preventable had standard parking protocols been followed. December 11, 2022. Sharon Reed, 53, boarded Flight 804 from Denver to Atlanta, her business suit pressed and carry-on stowed with practiced precision. Colleagues had known her as a high-powered consultant who brooked no delay, quick to escalate minor inconveniences to management and unafraid to challenge airline staff. Gate agents remembered heated disputes over seat assignments and priority boarding, and she often insisted her status entitled her to special treatment. On this flight, she was assigned a middle seat in row 18 after a last-minute equipment swap. Witnesses described her as visibly agitated, pacing the aisle and demanding to be reseated, her voice carrying above the pre-flight announcements. The aircraft, a Boeing 737-900, reached cruising altitude, 34,000 feet, with a cabin pressure differential of 8 pounds per square inch that held the fuselage sealed tight. FAA regulations required flight attendants to brief passengers on emergency procedures and to monitor cabin behavior, especially after takeoff. Sharon flagged down the lead attendant, insisting her seat was unacceptable and demanding an immediate upgrade. When told there were no available seats, she grew louder and threatened that she would get off right now. Flight attendants issued multiple warnings, explaining both policy and the physical impossibility of opening the emergency exit at altitude. Passengers in nearby rows later recalled Sharon's repeated outbursts and her refusal to comply with crew instructions. The situation escalated as she unbuckled her belt and lunged toward the overwing exit. Despite the warnings, Sharon gripped the exit handle and declared she would open the door and leave if her demands were not met. The cabin alarm triggered as she tampered with the mechanism, though at 34,000 feet the door could not be opened because of the pressure difference. Crew followed FAA protocols, signaling the cockpit and summoning the air marshal on board. As the marshal and 2 attendants moved to restrain her, Sharon resisted, flailing and shouting. A passenger's smartwatch, later submitted to investigators, recorded her heart rate peaking at 190 beats per minute. The physical struggle and extreme stress triggered a cardiac arrhythmia. Within moments, Sharon lost consciousness. The crew initiated cardiopulmonary resuscitation and used the onboard automated external defibrillator while the pilot diverted to St. Louis. Emergency medical teams boarded at 2:18 p.m., but resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. Sharon was pronounced dead at 2:29 p.m. The coroner's report cited sudden cardiac death secondary to ventricular fibrillation, exacerbated by acute emotional stress. Medical findings described an arrhythmic collapse precipitated by extreme sympathetic activation during the struggle. FAA investigators reviewed the incident and cited Sharon's repeated noncompliance and physical aggression as the direct cause of the emergency. Data from 2022 showed FAA fines for unruly passenger behavior exceeding $52,000 per incident, with a marked increase in in-flight disruptions since the pandemic. The airline introduced enhanced de-escalation training and support protocols for crew, while federal policy changes mandated stricter passenger screening and reinforced legal consequences for air rage. Industry analysts pointed to the case as a turning point, prompting a nationwide overhaul of unruly passenger enforcement. Public reaction was swift, with many travelers expressing frustration over rising in-flight incidents and offering limited sympathy for Sharon's actions. Commentators noted the irony that a dispute over a middle seat and a first-class upgrade that had been offered earlier had escalated into a fatal medical emergency. In the end, the rules that kept a pressurized cabin safe proved non-negotiable, no matter how loudly they were challenged. Across all 7 entries, one pattern stood out. Extreme entitlement could override common sense and turn minor inconveniences into fatal outcomes. These cases proved that arrogance is not just annoying, it is dangerous. In a world built on shared rules, ignoring boundaries had real, irreversible costs. The lesson is simple: reality always wins. If you want more shocking true life rankings, hit subscribe and join us for the next countdown.